So this is the big data. Thank you guys for attending our dead hour dialogue about big data and the humanities. This was presented and the idea to host this event was Dr. Troy Chatterjee in the Department of History. I'm with my colleague, Dr. Munoz, who will present also. And I would like to introduce my partner on the project, our original program director of big data, Dr. Jessica Bodo-Creed. And of course, our new dean, Dean Renee Villanowith, who was also a PI on the original NSF grant that gives us this opportunity to work with big data in the LA City this last 3 or 4 years. So Dean, thank you so much for participating and coming to support us. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, you're welcome. And it's a pleasure. So before I called Dawn this morning, I said, hey, what do you want me to talk about? And Dawn said, well, I want you to talk about the humanities and big data and how they interact and how they're as important for the humanities as they are for social sciences and natural sciences and so on. And so I, of course, immediately took to Google because that's what we do these days. And I typed in humanities and out popped a whole bunch of different schemes, a whole bunch of different definitions of humanities. So then I said, forget that. I went to images because I wanted just the names. And then I saw these bubbles that included completely different fields, but some of them included literature, history, philosophy, language, linguistics, anthropology, art history, religious studies, music, politics, law, journalism, so on and so forth. So to me, then the humanities really means everything. In that sense, I'm an archaeologist by training. And I like to say, perhaps arrogantly, that archaeology is the most scientific of the humanities and the most humanistic of the sciences. It sits somewhere in the middle, right? It's a social science, certainly, but in many parts of the world, it's taught under humanities departments, prehistory, things like that. And so in many regards, archaeology is a field similar to history in that we are mining the past, right? We're mining the past to inform the present and to perhaps to make decisions or to help inform us of the future. And so for me, archaeology, and I'll talk about my field, it's about time-space systematics, right? It's about things that we find in the ground that people left behind a long time ago. And what do I mean by time-space systematics? We need to make sense of things across space on the horizontal and through time in the vertical. And so it encompasses all of human history and, if we will, human prehistory. And so in that sense, we deal with lots of things, and naturally archaeologists are attracted to and have to deal with big data because we have big data sets. But so too does every other discipline in the humanities. I mean, we're at the point now that computers allow us to crunch information about historical phenomena, information about art history, and all the other humanities in such a way that we can begin to compare things on a broad and general scale and make inferences about the specific data sets that we are trying to interpret. I think that's exciting. I think that's especially exciting for the humanities because perhaps for the first time, or at least the first time in the last few decades or so, we're able to begin to grapple with humanistic concepts, the things that we study in art and music and literature on a grand scale, in a big comparative way. And so that's what this grant, big data grant, helps us to understand, helps us to know that big data isn't just something for the natural scientists, isn't just something for the chemists or the social scientists, but it's for everybody who's trying to achieve humanistic goals. And those humanistic goals, I think, are at the core, at the center of the traditional disciplines in the humanities. So I'm excited to I won't be able to hear, but it's been recorded. I'll be excited to go back to Dawn and Jorge's talks because big data situated in the humanities, I think, is sort of a cutting edge way of looking at how we can begin to incorporate big data concepts and humanistic goals. And so with that, I want to turn it over to people who are going to talk about things that are much more important than I can talk about. But never, and I think everybody, and I'd like to preach this beyond the screen today, that the humanities and the traditional humanities disciplines need to, not should, but need to be involved in discussions of big data, because big data today is being used to inform policy. It's being used to understand climate change. It's being used for a variety of things that affect ultimately who? Humans. And in that sense, big data and the humanities are a connection that can never be decoupled.
Thank you, Dean, so much. I'm so glad that we recorded that too. I appreciate that. So thank you again for taking the time out today to talk with us about big data. Just to give you an idea of how I got affiliated with big data, I have no training in this. I am a historian, you guys know this, and I was asked by the former dean to step in when Dr. Jessica Bodo Creed went on maternity leave to, sort of facilitate our big data grant and our program and working with students. And it was difficult because I could not grasp really what we could do as historians with big data. And it wasn't really until I started working with faculty in the NSS 1001 that I was able to really understand how impactful and important the big data is to us as historians, especially historians that are activists, that work with social justice, that work with, incarcerated individuals and organizations that really want to facilitate change. So when we were able to give the opportunity to 5 faculty members to be part of the inaugural, big data cohort for the NSS 1001, we met every Friday to talk about pedagogy and how we could use big data to train our students and to really have them develop skills that are necessary for the 21st century. So again, this came from a place of just inquiry. I was honored to be part of this. And I told the dean several times, you've baptized me like in water and you just kind of threw me in. Don't know what I'm doing kind of, but we're going to go ahead and handle the situation. And I was grateful that, one, to be exposed to the opportunity, but to also work with fabulous faculty that really took this idea of big data to mold it into their own curriculum and their own pedagogy and work with their students. My own personal use with big data is with our incarcerated population. We are building an archive based upon stories collected from incarcerated individuals that are going to be featured in a November exhibit. And that essentially is the collection of big data to use to also influence public policy about some of the changes that we need to facilitate in our carceral state. So the organization that I work closely with is the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership. And that organization partnered with Nipsey Hussle before his assassination to really develop policies and to work on, again, providing resource and access for formerly incarcerated people to overcome barriers that would hinder them to be fully reentry, to become reentry citizens in our society. And the data that we used from the NSF projects have really created a change in public policy. And next month, LARP, the organization that I work with, is going to present some of their policies that were directly impacted by the work that our students have done here at the College of NSS, but also individual historians and politicians and elsewhere as well. So, I just wanted us to talk today a little bit about really just how we can incorporate big data and how we can teach our students these skills and everything and really utilize big data to enhance our own pedagogy as historians. Okay, Dr. Munoz, I'd like to turn it over to you to share your experiences with this before we kind of get into our presentations.
Well, I think big data is very important in the humanities, especially for me, because it has allowed me to, in a sense, be able to expand what I can do. And it has also allowed me to understand from not just a hands-on position, but also join something that I love, which is working with computers, working with big data, and understanding the different software needed to be able to gather this information and then use it as a means for students to then take it on their own and then create something and that is theirs. And I think this is important. It's no longer just writing a paper. It's no longer just trying to regurgitate information, but rather taking these tools that we're providing them and then creating something that for them they can own it as their own, as something that they have created, something that they are presenting, and something that is outside of the classroom walls. So in a sense, it's a liberating aspect of pedagogy where the students are now able to find for themselves information, just like investigative reporters or just like researchers, as they hope they see themselves, and they teach this in the class over and over again. You are researching, you are investigating. This is what you do. This is how you gather information. I think it's going to be important to do this and to project this in the classes that we are using big data in, so that they understand exactly what we are trying to do, and at the same time allows them it gives them leeway to engage in whatever projects they want to engage in within the parameters given to them, for them to use their imagination. And that's important because they can create wonderful work if you just allow them basically to do so. So that's going to be also part of the presentation that I'll be giving in a moment. You're muted, Dr. Dennis.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. So I wanted to acknowledge and honor Dr. Gio Hortua, who was part of the inaugural faculty in NSS 1000, and he still is with NSN 1001. But he was part of this creation and this weekly dialogue that we had about big data. And I didn't want to put him on the spot, but Dr. Hortua, if you would
Yes,
share.
you do.
Yes, can you just share me your experiences for a couple minutes and everything, and then we can move on. But again, you were valuable.
I'm happy to be supportive. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So one of the most important parts of this, of course, basically a very similar experience where you're getting your feet wet. You're not sure exactly where this is going to go. But you start realizing as you're going through this that how valuable it is to connect students to bigger questions, right? Bigger questions about the city, bigger questions about the realities, and tuning it in specifically with the data available and new data that adds on to the conversation. And so, one of the biggest learning experiences that I had was thanks to Dr. Dennis, as much as the support of Dr. Munoz's efforts here through big data, is that working close with students and trying to get at how to investigate some of these big questions that they had in the classroom, and using community, right? Using community to be able to draw from them those experiences, those reactions, that those impressions about whatever the topic under scope was. So absolutely, something that I can see this being incorporated into the Department of History, into the social sciences in general, and something that I would personally would love to see graduate students engage as well, so that they are able to also engage sources on a different level, right? So that we think more broadly about what sources really mean. So again, this is perhaps I'm echoing a lot of what has been said, but I want to say once you start entering those gates, right, I think you'll realize how fruitful this really is. So.
Don, you're
You're muted again.
Okay, hello. All right. So I wanted to add on very quickly to what Dr. Hortua had said, is that we need to provide additional research skills, additional skills for our students. And again, exposing them to big data is also dismantling barriers that might be there in our early educational K through 12 setting. It's very similar to what the work in the archives is about, exposing students to skills at a very early age to also, facilitate inquiry. And so Dr. Hortua, Dr. Munoz, you will see in a couple of minutes, and then the others that were, a part of this, Dr. Lonnie Cupchoy, they really did, go beyond the, I guess, the responsibilities of faculty member to really, be dedicated to the students and provide these skills. We want our students to be competitive, of course. We want our students to engage with our community. That was a huge topic And again, what Dr. Hortua and Dr. Munoz did was to just, plant that seed of interest in our students' minds. And sometimes that's all we need, to get our students on board with some of these skills that are so valuable as we navigate this pandemic landscape that is so different for all of us right now. So what I would like to do now is turn it over to Dr. Munoz to talk really about, what he did with big data and religion. We don't think that that's compatible. But it is. So Dr. Munoz, thank you. Dr. Hortua, thank you again for your comments.
Let me go ahead and share. I have a quick presentation leading up to my dashboard. So big data in the humanities. And first of all, big data in the classroom allows the student to work outside the classroom, and that's important. And you can do this with any research target, really. It allows you to work within the community, and you also are working with the tools you have, and also learning using new tools. One of the things that we found out is that we can disseminate information and we can gather information through social media as well. That's going to be important. And also use the classroom to come up with innovative solutions to problems that may result from our conversations, how to get this information out, how to get surveys out, how to have the community access to surveys. So you put it out there as a problem to solve as a group. And big data also gives the ability for students to use their imagination in terms of problem solving. And that's going to be rather important. It also teaches the student to use tools in data mapping itself. That is, expanding their information gathering tools by teaching them how to use survey creation software, how to use map creation software, how to go and take all this information and be able to disseminate it in such a way and analyze it in such a way that it makes sense. So there's a lot of information that is going on, and students then are allowed to work with real-time data, not just about, like I said, any topic, but as you will see in this case, with very specific and narrow topics, as we did with the research we did, which was using big data to map historically Black churches in the greater LA area, which seems to be, something that you wouldn't use big data to do, but in fact, turned out to give us a much more in-depth understanding of these communities, and allow the students then to basically become entrenched in that data set, in that data mapping, not just at the data level, but also in the community level. They were able to talk to members of the churches. They were able to see, for example, some of their live sermons and how they interacted, something that you can't really teach in the classroom. So it expanded their worldview beyond the classroom. It also allows students to gather real data on their research target, whatever that may be. It allows the students to work with the community as well. And I think this is important because it liberates students beyond the classroom. The students, for example, got to talk to church members. They created surveys that were able to be given to both church members, also to the leadership, that dealt with different things in the church itself. They were able to gather media to put into their storyboards, and then they worked with nonprofits, and including, of course, the churches themselves. And students learn from others, and of course, with working with each other on how to participate in their own communities. So this process allowed them to do a variety of things, not just dealing with data that seems to be, in some cases, unemotional and dispassionate, but rather allowed them to engage in a passionate storyboard creation, as you will see. This allows us, of course, for the creation of what we did at the end, which was a digital archive. And the limitation in terms of these archives really is due to the instructor or the student's imagination. So open up the imagination of the students. And again, It's all going to depend on what the students search for and find. And that is important because in a sense, they will provide you what you need if you tell them exactly what you want. Let them be free to find what you want, whether it be historical demographics, economic data, media. The limitation, again, is going to be, as I said, in terms of the student's limitation. So for example, in terms of political data, we can use more specific data. For example, in these churches, what were some instances of racism? What were some instances of violence? Could these be used as sanctuaries, etc.? So it really depends on how far you're willing to go using this information. And this takes me to the last part, which is the idea of liberation pedagogy, which is the idea that we can expand ourselves beyond the classroom and provide students different tools for them to succeed beyond the simple write a paper, take a test, but something that they can create, something that they can do and see it. And it gives power for the students to create. The students can do, surprising things. And they do surprise me every single time because they excel my expectations. And I have pretty high expectations. They, trust me, they know they do. And, for one, provide clear instructions, show them how the software works, and then have them struggle. It's okay to struggle. And this is one of the other things that I like about this. You can struggle doing some work like this, but it also allows them to help one another, to be with one another. And then students will create amazing work when they are given the freedom to do so and the freedom to use their imagination, again, beyond the scope of the classroom, beyond the scope of an essay, beyond the scope of a test. So with that, let me show you the dashboard we created using this information. So I guess I have to sign in again. There we go. Okay. So this is the big data project that we created. You guys can see the screen, right? You'll be able to see the dashboard. On the left-hand side, we have all the historical churches. There are more historical churches than there were actual storyboards. And the reason why that's the case is because we had more churches than student groups. And if you click here, you will get two things. One was the surveys that they created. So let me make this bigger. And here are the surveys they were able to create using the survey, I think it was survey 1, 2, 3. And they were given complete autonomy over the survey. And then these were the surveys they sent out. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, this was in the middle of the pandemic, we didn't get that many responses. And I think it'll be different, coming up in the spring when they can actually go talk to the people face to face, because that's going to be different. On the other hand, though, they did their research, and this is, for example, a particular storyboard on the First African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the oldest African American church. It provides a map where exactly it is located. It gives demographics of the particular area specified by the zip code. And then you look at the history of the First African Episcopal Church all the way to Reverend Richard Allen, and then the history of the first First African American Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles. The link doesn't work anymore, and then you also get a history of Richard Allen, and then a history of Biddy Mason, who is the one who established the church itself. And then they were able to put media up. They were able to look at current leadership, past leadership. If you keep going, they put information about the mural that is in it, who created the church as we know it today, media about the history of the church, the mural itself. I think you can make it bigger. The neighborhood questions, issues in terms of the neighborhood. You have here Homeowners Loan Corporation of 1939, and you're looking at historical information, historical demographics beyond today's demographics. So as you can see, all, the storyboards that they created were pretty much like this. I mean, very innovative, very informative. And at the end, I taught them how to create an infographic, a quick snapshot of their website. So then we connect this with information about the church. So this is First African, the one we were just looking at. We can see the demographic data, and we can then see the population there today. We can see economic data, changing it to economic data as we see it. We also see on the other left-hand side more information by zip code in terms of demographics. We can look at the type of religions are connected. We can look in terms of the census and more demographics in terms of population by age range. So as you can see, there is a lot of information that we can gather. And this is something that I want to do for next semester with historically Jewish churches. Something that I want to add now to it, of course, is make another map dealing with anti-Semitism, the type of anti-Semitism that is, when did anti-Semitic violence begin? Has there been a resurgence? So we can explore even more. And this is something I wish I had done with this. But as I said, each semester I'm going to be learning more on how to use it and how to go more in depth. So that's what I have here. Any questions?
Jorge, this is just so impressive. My jaw is dropping. How can I put this on the history website? That's what I
You can
want
do
to
the
know.
recording. Yeah, we can, Dr. Choi, I can send you the links and everything. We can do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. We need to brag about this, and this will be in our newsletter, of course, but I want to make a permanent place for this on our website. So anyone looking at it will see, wow,
Right.
This is what our students are doing.
Choi, I can send you all of the links to the 5 inaugural faculty members, including Dr. Hortua's project, and we can showcase that. And I can write up a little something for the newsletter. I think it's important to highlight what faculty are just doing with this stuff. It's great. So that's okay. Okay.
Please do that. Yeah, I'm glad Julie, she's our web mistress, so we need to put all this on our website.
Oh, Julie. Oh, yeah. So I can just send her an email. I will do that. Yeah. And then we can highlight. What I wanted to show you guys really fast is that we built this this Canvas shell for any faculty that want to work with big data. And we can send all of these resources out and everything. But right down here, and Julien, I might just add you to this, is all of our faculty projects and all of the stuff that they did, with their students right here. I've kept that so I can send that, and then we can just continue our dialogue about, the importance of big data in the humanities, if you would like to. So.
And don't feel overwhelmed, please.
Yeah.
Like, this is piecemeal, milestones. I mean, it's a lot of good stuff. This stuff does take time. It takes, multiple folks to work on this stuff. And one thing I learned is that the patience to go through this, right? To navigate these things. Yeah.
No, I didn't really understand big data, to be honest with you, until Lonnie Cup-Choi put together her archive. And I was like, oh my goodness, now I understand, Dean, what I'm supposed to be doing and stuff. But it really took me working with my own colleagues to understand really just the importance and what we could do with it. And like Dr. Munoz says, it's so liberating, I think, to showcase this to our students and have them work through problems and have these skills. You know, it's going to create more agency, I think, for our students too as well. I'd like to open the floor up to Julian and Dr. Vergara, Diana and Jose, if you have any questions or comments for Dr. Hortua or Dr. Munoz, you know, about what we can do with big data, how we can support it and continue, you know, this work that is so amazing for our students. Yes, Dr. Vergara, where are you at? Okay, yes.
So first, congrats. It's really an amazing project. And I just learning so much about how you do all of this. And one of the things that really impressed me, I don't know if I have a question here. I just want to say how great it is. But I was always hesitant to the big data because it didn't have historical data, you know, or it feels that it's more current events. And I'm like, well, okay, what are we gonna do? But what I love about Jorge's project is that even if he uses, students use like current data about like income, all of that, you can have a historical perspective. And I found that I didn't think about that before, but it seems so fascinating because you can still teach history with current data. So, I don't know, sorry, I don't have a question. Yes, congrats, everybody.
No, Dr. Vergara, it's good though, but those are hesitations that we want to kind of demystify though too. That is just not numbers. Like the city of LA needs historians, like our grad students, to really write historical context for this data. We really, you know, have a way to get into the LA city and start producing content for this stuff. Also with Esri, they need historians to interpret the data to write, like you said, Dr. Vergara, the historical context, which I think is really important too. So, you know, there's space for us in this big data world, if you will, and we're valuable. We're absolutely valuable, what we're doing with this and everything. So yeah, you know, anything that you can come up with, I'm excited that you'll be applying for our big data course redesign, you know, as well. So we're going to work with everybody, every faculty that wants to apply and really utilize data in a project or even in a full 16-week course as well. I'm excited, Dr. Vergara, to see what you can come up with. So thank you.
I
yeah.
wanted to add that one of my students, he was looking at, I think, a church in South Central. And what he did, because he noticed the demographics were changing, he actually found a data map that showed the change in demographics. I think it was a 30-year map that showed how you had more African-American population, and over time, it became about 95% Latino population. And then explain with that data map why the church felt compelled to add a Spanish-speaking service, which is found to be very interesting because this is a historically Black church that has African Americans going, but felt compelled to add Spanish speakers. So he explained it by showing this map, and I told him that's brilliant, you know. And I asked him, you know, tell me where you got this information, because I want those maps, you know, because those show, you know, what Dr. Vergara was saying, which is the historical change. And that, like I said, that's something I want to do next semester, you know, in terms of anti-Semitic violence in LA, you know, show a historical change. You know, are there moments of lulls versus highs and lows, and how do they compare to political changes that are going on? So there is a lot that I would like to do, that I learned from last semester that I couldn't do last semester, but now I have an idea on what to do next semester. So for me, this is going to be an ongoing project where I'm adding new, you know, churches, or new, whether it be historically, you know, Jewish temples, or bringing in, you know, historically Islamic temples or Islamic mosques, you know. So really, you know, trying to portray something that is, you know, supposedly non-big data, you know, and then put big data on it and see where it gets me. That's the exciting part, because I don't know what I'm gonna get at the end. But I do know what I want.
Yeah, I think it's so many applications, because I was wondering, based off what Dr. Dennis said about, social justice initiatives, the Black church historically has a strong connection to activism in the African American community, especially in Los Angeles and California, on the whole. So it'd be interesting to see if we could create a data map that shows the churches that had high numbers of, activist leaders or strong participation within the community that then resulted in a wider social justice or civic, civil rights movement in certain neighborhoods across Los Angeles. So I think the applications for the data maps are really quite amazing. And it's a lot of technology to kind of grasp, but I think once students and professors grasp it, I think the applications for making historical connections are so vast, because I think that could be really helpful to show the history of, African American activism when it comes to civil rights in neighborhoods and how that translates to today, to new movements for social justice and that kind of thing. So no, it's very interesting. And yeah, no, I just wanted to say that it's an amazing project with the Black churches. So,
I think.
No,
the-
I
yeah,
think
oh, sorry.
I just want to say that that's exactly the idea that I have of letting your imagination go, right? See what else you can add and how robust you can make it. And I think this is just going to be something that we are going to continually working on. We have this now as a beginning, then we can just continue adding more to it. And with each semester, I can say, okay, now let's refine it, and let's work on it as a class on what was started here. Now let's move on to add more to it. And I think with ideas like yours is what will generate more information and more data. I think that's why I think it's going to be an ongoing project, and the sky's the limit. The imagination is the limit, basically.
Dr. Munoz, I like what you said. Esri, the software company that the city of LA uses for the GIS, they have a whole entire education department that we can utilize and bring in and to teach us and to kind of work with us on utilizing big data in our own projects. I talked to the geographer who's in charge of it, and he has data maps that look at the plague in the year 1000. And he made, it was so interesting because I thought of Dr. Kitty Ali. I got excited when I see some stuff that my colleagues might be interested in. So, the idea of data, even on our own as American historians, the 1790 census was a piece of data, and we don't think about that. And when I started looking at data after I looked at what Lonnie did and Gio and Dr. Jorge did, I was like, oh, we've been exposed to data. We just need to maybe shift and adapt our lens a little bit to recognize that it's always been present with us. But now as humanists, as the part of the humanities, it's our job really now maybe to take that step further. So, we just kind of want to demystify what we can do with big data. I think what Julin and Dr. Chatterjee is doing with the garden movement and the planting of indigenous plants, and maybe having an indigenous expert come in, is fantastic work that we can really, coalesce with big data and use some of that software to really develop, Choi's Garden and some of these other projects too for our department, I think,
No, Don, what Jolyn and I will be working with you guys, thanks for the grant that we got, is looking on data on community gardens, on farmers markets, and accessible food resources in and around our campus, especially in East Los Angeles. And I'm very interested in canopy, tree cover, because with climate change and heat islands, it's the poorest neighborhoods that have the fewest trees. And we just don't have the data for these. I know the data exists, but no one's done the map. So that's
right. And that's what we want is the maps, and we can teach with that. We can, facilitate, policy change. That's what the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership did. They took the data that our seed scholars, put together, and they just ran with it, and they used it as evidence to really bring about, policies that were very much, in need of changing our mass incarceration, our carceral state too. So absolutely, and we should be thinking about that as historians and educators. Where is this work going to be the most impactful? So I think all of these projects that you guys are doing and talking about and working on, I think are fabulous. It will really show the adaptability that historians have, to really just be at the forefront for a lot of our change that we need, and to create a good dialogue that we definitely need as well. Julian, Dr. Munoz, anybody else want to have some comments and everything before we kind of close out the Dead Hour dialogue? I'm going to name it that too. That we're going to name it the Dead Hour dialogue, y'all. That's it. That came from the history department, y'all. So, anything else? Christian, thank you for showing up. I appreciate this. Okay. And Jose and Diana, I hope you become inspired to maybe learn some skills, work with Julian in the department or one of us, to really get some of these skills as you further your own academic career and what you guys want to do too. So.
Thank you for bringing something brand new to the history department. I am so excited and so admiring after looking at the work that y'all have done.
Oh, Munoz has done a phenomenal, every one of these projects was just phenomenal, and Esri saw them. And Esri is, again, in such need of having our historical, connections in our context and everything, and we should collaborate. Science and, history is very compatible. We know this. So, it's just good stuff for us. Any other questions or comments? I think before we close out this session. Christian, yes.
Dr. Dennis, I just want to say thank you so much, and for everybody else. Since I've been here, this is the first time I've seen such a big project, come into play, basically. And I just wanted to know that in the near future, would it be possible to kind of get the Latin American Studies Department and the Chicano Studies Department involved? Because I think there's more collaboration with them, because they probably might have something that they probably have something more than we have. So I think that working with other departments would bring more information that the public does not know at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to collaborate with ethnic studies, with the Pan-African Studies Department, Latin American Studies, and Chicano Studies. We don't want to be gatekeepers of this knowledge ever. That's not our role. And we've all committed as educators to not be like that. So collaboration, the Dean Vilanowith is all about, let's collaborate, let's be transdisciplinary this next couple of years, and really work on trying to, create these projects that enable our students to really, go further than we would like, that we would like them to go. So Dr. Hortua, any comments from you? Anything before we end out our Dead Hour dialogue?
I'm not sure what hasn't been said, or needs to be said, but for sure it's about giving it a shot and absolutely just engaging it, and thinking about the historical at the same time, how that's been refashioned or not, right? So I think it's definitely a vital tool that we can use, whether we're looking at religion, whether we're looking at social movements, right, historic churches, or even the construction of different buildings, right, space as an idea for politic. I was thinking about Olvera Street immediately, right, as I'm thinking about big data and the way just Olvera Street, right, you're thinking, Chris, in terms of like, Chicano Latino studies as much as Latin American studies, like just that space right there, right, that's gone through so much within the era, right, the post-American, post-Mexican era, and looking at that space, I completely see how that can be used in that particular area. So along with Chavez Ravine, but that's another story.
No, that is, but that's great though. And maybe we should, as a department, really work on collecting these narratives and seeing how we can use big data to really preserve a lot of this too. If we're looking at spatial relations and gender violence, and then Chavez Ravine, the complete annihilation of an entire community, is so worth using data to preserve and everything too. The Project Rebound oral history collection that we're launching in November has a database already of all letters collected from incarcerated people during COVID. And they're going to use big data to really inform policy about how we need to have healthcare in our carceral systems. We should not have incarcerated people, living in pain, not being able to have access to that. And this data that they've collected in the form of letters and personal experiences, again, will shift and shape that form, that policy that we need so much in the city of Los Angeles and everything. So I think this dialogue should continue. Choi, hi, I remember him from our Santa Monica protest that we were there with Dr. Magara, doing our duly justice as historians and everything. But Choi, let's have these let's have more of these dead hour dialogue about some things that we're doing, what kind of innovative methods we are doing, and just see if we can get everybody involved and just sharing this on a more frequent basis and everything. So Dr. Munoz, thank you for your work and your presentation. So
I just wanted to say one more thing. I wanted to say thank you to Christian, because he actually just gave me, a very good idea, especially because my next project is going to be mapping historically Latino churches in the LA area, and that's a massive project. That's why I didn't do it first, because that's a massive project. But the idea of talking to the Latino Chicano departments is would be great, because they'll give me some type of map to look at, and then hopefully work together to create something robust. And remember, all these are going to be part of one dashboard. So what I want to do is have one place where all this information will be available, whether you're looking for Latino, Chicano Latino information, African American information, Jewish information. I mean, basically the makeup of the LA area in various forms. So, Christian, thank you very much. That's a good idea, and I'm going to keep it in mind for my next project.
This is excellent. I'm so grateful for the faculty in our history department to being student-centered. Everything we do is so student-centered, and it gives me so much joy to be very authentic with my colleagues about how we center the students' lived experiences, the communities in every one of our work. So I want to continue this dialogue, and I don't have a problem facilitating this, but I think it's just nice to sit down and talk and celebrate our students' work and our accomplishments, and really what our vision should be as educators and grad students too. So if we have nothing else to talk, we can end our first official dead hour dialogue with the Cal State History Department. We're going to go ahead and coin that, so get on that, somebody. But I enjoy sharing space with you and learning from you and providing space for my colleagues to shine. That's so important to me too. So I'm very appreciative. With that, I will send you on your way. I want you to have a good weekend. And thanks again for sharing space about big data and the humanities. I'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.